Okay, good morning, everyone. For the final session in the CICS track, I've been watching how Rob hosts these sessions all the way through, and he's let me have the wings this time to kick this off. Now, this is the CICS Q and A. This is the opportunity to ask all the experts, and we've got a raft of them on the call, all ready to answer your questions. First off, though, I'm just going to hand over to Steve Wallin, who's our CICS Development Director, who's just going to say a few words for you.
Hey, morning. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody. I hope you've had a fantastic GSE UK conference over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we're still doing this event virtually, but I hope that as you think about, where you are on your modernization journey, and with Agile turning 20 this year, it certainly made me reflect on the journey that we've had in terms of that continuous improvement, the momentum that we get in terms of empowering teams to look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it, and really work with their customers to continue to improve what we do, how we deliver. I think CICS has certainly come a huge distance in the last 20 years in terms of what we do with clients, the design partnership calls, and how we go about delivering the capabilities. So immensely proud of what the team have got in CICS 5, 6, and the continuous delivery releases that we add new capabilities into. And wherever you are on your journey with CICS, whether it's predominantly maintaining the applications, whether it's bringing in Spring Boot to be co-located with your core CICS, whether it's looking at your DevOps pipeline, looking at security, building new capabilities and engaging with some of the AI conversations as part of your transactions. There's a huge raft of exciting activities underway right now, and I'm certainly, continually impressed with what we do for testing, for consistency, resiliency, and security on the platform. For me, there's a real vibrancy and an excitement for the platform and for CICS right now. The Z15 program itself, I think, is certainly ahead of where we were with Z14 for the same point in its life cycle. We've set a record for the number of MIPS that we've shipped on the platform, and CICS is a huge part of that success. And in the last 10 years, we've grown, I think it's 3.5 times the installed capacity that we have on the mainframe. And again, CICS is a huge part of that activity and customer pieces. Hopefully you've seen the new Telum processor. That's obviously something that the CICS team is focused on. And as we look at the capabilities that you have and that you've talked about this week, there's some even more exciting things to come next year. So looking forward to your questions. We've got the technical talent of the team on the call here. So without further ado, Nick, I'll hand it back to you to compare all the questions and feed us in what the people on the call would like us to talk about.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for those kind words at the beginning, and thank you for setting the scene here. Now, I just wanted to do a quick review of what you've heard over the last 2 weeks. So we had a CICS update from Mark. We had quite a bit on of it was quite a I'm trying to be polite, Colin. You got a hell of a lot of information into your security session, so thank you for that. We had John giving us a foundation update. We had Israel, who can't really join us today because it's rather early in his day, giving us some performance tuning and violations. We had Tony and Mark Hiscox giving us an update on the ZOS Connect and how to monitor it and check it. And Tony's on the panel today as well. And we, of course, had a nod to our support of mixed languages with our CICS and Java. Support from Phil Wakelin. He is also on the call today. And then this week, and you can see that we've actually had much more content this week. We had Stu talking to us about using Ansible. We had Chris in, I think, what was probably had the most interaction of all in his CICS resource configuration session. More stuff from Israel. There was a lot of numbers in that session, I've got to say, a lot of numbers. We had like a performance afternoon, and then yesterday morning we had Mark and Matt from MQ, setting a bit of a precedent, I think, having CICS and MQ on the same stage, but we were nice to each other. And we were discussing Kafka there. And then we went into automated testing with Galassa, and we've got James, who was doing the demos there, on here to answer your questions. Then finally, we had Steve and Joe this morning talking about the IBM's virtual test platform. And here we are, we're now at the Q and A. So I'd like to throw the floor over. You should be able to unmute yourself to ask a question. If you have audio issues, please feel free to just type the question in the chat. We've got a couple of us monitoring that chat so that people can be invited to either unmute themselves, or we can just call the question out. So with that, please, I'd like to hear the next question. And that's just a few of the people that are on the call. If your name's not there or your picture's not there, it's probably because you've got a silly picture, or it just wouldn't fit in the format of the slide. So Rob, have we got any questions yet?
I was just thinking, I'm not sure if mine doesn't count as a silly picture anyway.
Oh,
No.
No.
So I'm going to have to ask one. I've got a big list here. Okay, it's a bit of a planning question for me, and a little bit customer specific. But I have CICS resources installed, as probably most of you know, on the CSD, but also in BAS, in Business Application Services, and CPSM. If I was a new customer coming to the platform, would it be best to install my resources in BAS or on the CSD? And I think particularly in light of some of the newer tools that we've seen recently that are quite exciting, that seem to deal with CSD definitions. So for the future, if I was completely new, should I be using BAS or the CSD?
I'll jump in with something controversial. You will have seen from Chris's talk and the open beta discussions that we have something called the CICS Resource Builder tool. So if you were completely new, that's what you should use. I'm waiting for my colleagues to throw rocks at me now, because right now that works with the CSD, but it points to a way where resources are managed under version control and can be accessed by different users, and then are built into a binary resource, which happens to be the CSD today, but so gives us the option later.
Hopefully I'm unmuted now.
Yes, you have.
Yeah, I was just desperate to answer that question, and I was pushing the button. It kept telling me I wasn't allowed to unmute myself. So yeah, so I'd go a bit. Well, I mean, I think Matthew's answer's spot on, Rob. But I'd go a bit further and just directly say, if I was talking to a brand new CICS customer today, I'd tell them to only use the CSD and not to use BAS.
Thanks, Fraser. Yeah, I mean, I think as far as that new tool, we've got some big programs of work at the moment around automation and cloud-like environments, and also taking through definitions through these environments through to production, where it seems to fit into the processes that we've drawn up really, really well. And luckily for me, I think that what we're looking at when we deploy things in test environments is a kind of temporary store before we sort of assimilate all these definitions.
Yeah.
So it kind of fits anyway to going into the CSD. And I've mentioned this before at the CAF and other things, but if we had a bit more of a tool that could convert things from the CSD to BAS, which obviously happens at CICS Startup and happens in tools like CICS CM, if I had a bit of that logic, that would be brilliant. That would be the icing on the cake. But yeah, I'm very, very excited by that one.
So, I mean, on that front, I mean, let's say it's something that we continue to kick around internally. And I think having just made a directional statement, like I just did, saying I believe that CSD is where you should be going, it might be churlish for us not to provide people that did adopt BAS with some more help than we have so far.
Thanks very much. Okay. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to put in? I'm just having a look at the chat.
Yeah, I can't see any in the chat. This could be the shortest session on record.
No, I've got more questions. So I think, again, this is a similar sort of planning question, but obviously with CICS 5.6 and the next release, Vulcan, and certainly IBM's announcements and planning, we can see that containerization at various levels on the ZOS platform is kind of a key technology now. We've had some presentations on Ansible and CICS participating in various type of new orchestrations. Containerization for CICS, does the panel think that that's the best way to pick this up? Is it for new apps that are coming onto the platform? Is it for legacy apps that we might have that might be Java and sort of look like the new world anyway, that would fit in it? Or should we be looking at our existing rather intricate COBOL legacy apps that all talk to each other and thinking about putting those into containers, bearing in mind that some of the application boundaries might be a little bit blurred? Where should we start?
Okay, that's obviously one for me.
If you want to go first.
So I think we're still on a journey, and obviously to start with, we want to open the aperture as far as possible. While we're engaging with customers, and we've done that through some of our things like the design partnership, which some of the people on the call will be part of, and we've also shared we know there are certain critical patterns which are aligned very much with the CICS value proposition. So if we didn't support APIs, COBOL and DB2, then we kind of, what would be the point of having a CICS container? On the other hand, it's not going to be possible, at least initially, or possibly ever, to support everything that anyone's ever done, because you get a sort of law of diminishing returns. And we'll certainly be focusing on the broader mission of around modernization in place. And so there will be, a strong emphasis around things like APIs and modern languages like Java. So I think we haven't sort of landed specifically what it's for yet. The aperture is open. We understand, the core value propositions of CICS, but there will necessarily be, we're testing out some restrictions around aligning with the way that containers work in terms of how containers communicate with each other. Do we look at some of the existing CICS comms technology? Does that fit with containers, or should we go in the APIs route? So, we haven't landed yet, but we do understand what the core value that we need to support is.
Just to add into what Matthew said, I've been working with a couple of customers where I actually think it's less about the service or application itself, but the rest of the application topology. So one example is there's a security service that's running on CICS on Z, and some other parts of the application are already running in a public cloud, and the customer wants to manage those in a holistic way together, as a proper hybrid topology. And so having a containerized approach for that particular Z service running on CICS makes complete sense there, because then they can orchestrate and manage the deployment, the scaling, all the characteristics of that application as a holistic set across these different pieces of infrastructure in a much more consistent way. So it may also depend on the relationships that service or that application has with other components running in other parts of the infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think the way you asked the question, Rob, almost answers it in some ways, but it highlights one thing that, and as Matthew mentioned, this, I think you should be thinking of this as part of a modernization journey. It's not something we're intending or expecting can be turn handle. I run a couple of tools and my entire estate suddenly runs in containers. So it's at the other end of the spectrum, I think, where you should be thinking it application by application, service by service. Is this appropriate to move? And there'll be all sorts of technical and business factors that guide that appropriateness. But I mean, you're right in that certain types of application, like the newer ones, might well have a lower cost burden to move, so might be more appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, in terms of like application modernization, our recent experience, I was talking during Phil's presentation on Java, this time round and just doing a bit of an update on a Spring Boot application, which we're moving to the mainframe. And the kind of business drivers or the technical drivers behind that are, we've got a modern application that runs off host, but it doesn't run very well because of latency. And so in terms of a killer app, that kind of fits into moving things closer to the other apps or closer to the data in DB2. And I just find that having been involved in the design forums and the CAF and things, when we bring up these new things, I spend half my time worrying about my back office application, which is the most diverse application I've ever seen in my life, and how I put that into a container. And I think it's just the wrong way to think about things. I'm sort of looking for reasons not to do stuff, whereas finding killer apps and things that look good is probably a little bit easier now with containers, because you don't really want to modernize an existing COBOL application. You want to take something that struggles to talk to your mainframe and grab it. That's my experience at the moment as a customer anyway.
That's a really good first use case, Rob. A really good first use case.
As Ian has pointed out on the chat, it's not unique to CICS, to Z or ZOS. It's across any platform.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the easiest effort is always the lower hanging fruit. You know, whenever you see people saying, "Oh, well, we've done this for this bank," and you find out it's the Bank of Zatislavia with 2 blokes and a dog, and that's really easy to do. And when you've got to do 5,000 transactions a second, it's kind of a different kettle of fish. But if you've got something that's doing high volume already and struggling, and it's not closely coupled, and I think that just fits on my targets in my rifle scopes, if you like, as things to do. It's harder to influence as a CICS person, but when we get the opportunity, the results are pretty startling.
One of the things I love about the consistency of the infrastructure with things like containers is the ability for some of the teams that don't get to use Z to take the parts of the application that they have and deploy it in a place that they perhaps haven't tested before. And exactly like you say, Rob, you know, starting to see the benefits of running that component on Z as it can be of great benefit to teams that haven't done it before. And if they can do it from their orchestration control plane that they use every day, and all they've done is added a new deployment target from an infrastructure point of view, I think that will hopefully simplify the ability for people to get new stuff onto CICS and onto Z.
At the moment, we have no more questions in the chat.
Let me get Rob a break then.
We should rename the session
Steve.
Rob's Q and A,
Please.
shouldn't we?
Please.
let me ask the question I've been asked more than any other by customers this year. In fact, still get asked it. We've got a lot of customers, fair proportion, are currently on TS 5.4, who are tentatively planning to upgrade to, let's call it 6.1, but would like some certainty that 5.4 will be supported long enough for them able to complete an upgrade to 6.1. Marco recognised this question from, we discussed it earlier in the year, but so let me rephrase it slightly differently. 2 parts. Are you planning to make an announcement about the end of support of 5.4 before you make an announcement about the availability of 6.1? And when you do make an announcement about 5.4, how much notice are you planning to give?
Okay, I'll take that one as I've already answered it. Yeah, so as with all ZOS products, when we announce end of service, we give at least a year. So that's IBM's sort of commitment to our customers. In CICS, we've traditionally given a lot longer, and we'll do so this time. So I would, you know, our plan at the moment is 5.4 is going to be supported to the end of 2023. That's not yet announced, but you can look out for that at the beginning of next year. So you'll have plenty of time crossover, if you like, between 5.4 being fully supported and the next upcoming release, which we're aiming to be available mid next year. So, you'll have at least 1.5 years crossover to upgrade directly. As you know, you don't need to upgrade to any intermediate releases. So I think that's as plain speaking as we can get at this moment.
Okay, thanks, Mark. That's clear.
Yeah.
Are there any prereq qualifications that should be addressed for people looking to upgrade in the future, Mark?
So it depends what you mean by prereq. So we publish all of our dependencies on the website. So yes, every release, we, if you like, establish which other products we work with, and then we obviously test CICS with a number of other products as well. But the key prereqs are fairly much this. Well, it depends what releases you're comparing it with, but yeah, COS 2.3 and Java 8 are our primary prereqs. But if you use CICS, obviously with MQ, DB2, IMS, etc., we list all of those on the website. But there's no significant issues, in the differences between version 5 and version 6 prereqs. It's just some products go out of service, so we only test and claim support for later releases.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. We've been talking a lot about that lately, and I think that's an interesting insight. Speaking as us with our customer experience, we've often skipped 2 releases instead of 1. In fact, I think that's pretty much our default position, having a large number of CICS regions. We struggle to get the rollout done from download to install in less than 2 years, but we have made significant inroads into that. Some of the dynamic things that we've done via the CAF and things that you guys have changed have really helped us as a customer. Probably the biggest hurdle at the moment for me personally is or the biggest focus is to do when things get announced, because if stuff goes GA in, let's just say, July, that presents us with more challenges than when it gets released in January. And the reason being for that, with our long release cycle, is that we end up with 2 change freezes at Christmas with a July release in our project plans, which is a number of months where we can't do an awful lot, as opposed to 1 if we do 18 months from January to July, or getting rolled out by then. And a bit like the way that the CAF changes sometimes, the operational rhythm of the CAF, depending where we are in the release cycle, when you go GA, makes a big difference to us as a customer, because as a financial institution, we have change freezes during the run up to Christmas.
Yeah, so as you know, IBM tend to have announcements and availability of those products that are announced in the same quarter for revenue recognition reasons. Otherwise, it can be seen as a promise to deliver things in the future, and various financial constraints on IBM would prohibit us from doing that. And I guess another aspect is probably different companies around the world have different planning cycles, so it'll probably be difficult for us to to establish a best time of year. And the third thing really is, John is working his magic to allow customers to upgrade SVC code and other things that require you to install and restart the LPARs to bring in the later releases of the code that lives inside the LPA. So that can be done in advance. John, you may want to give us a hint as to when that's coming.
Yes, it's not quite ready yet, but I would think probably late this year or early next. We'd want to. What we're planning to do is release the Vulkan SVC code and the IRP code ahead of the GA. Just to give you an opportunity to maybe fit in with IPL windows, because some customers, oh great, they want to move, but they've got to wait until the next IPL window. So we're not getting rid of the requirement to have to IPL, but we're just trying to ship it early to give you a fighting chance of getting that in early. So look out for that end of fourth quarter or early first quarter.
Yeah. And of course, we have the open beta available throughout the development cycle. So if the constraint on your environment is with testing, we would obviously encourage you to be able to take the open betas and test with those early, or to, if there's any other tools, for example, that you need upgrading to start either testing or working with those vendors to get those ready sooner. So as customers, you can certainly help us down that road by bringing the ecosystem, if you like, in line and helping us test and work with vendors and being part of the design partnership, just to make sure that the product's good for your environment out of the box. But yeah, otherwise, if the timing is mid-year for you, next year is not great. I'm not sure we can do much about that this time around.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to release things at different times. I'm just thinking about how long things stay in service. Is this kind of just a subtle play on that, rather than it being like fixed every release is as easy to do as the others. That's all I'm saying. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So.
Rob, could I break protocol and maybe ask you a question?
Sure.
Matthew, just before you do that, could I just say the time, according to me, is 10:57. We do plan to stop for 2 minutes at 11 o'clock. So just keep that in mind.
Maybe I'll ask the question, then Rob can think about it for a couple of minutes while he's not thinking about the broader, if he's not thinking about the broader consequences of today, and then come back. So I've got 2 minutes to ask my question. So you mentioned about skipping releases, and one question I have with you is has there been a situation, and we have visited this before, when you've wanted to take one of the intermediate releases because there's a specific piece of functionality, but you've had to wait? And have you not? And under what circumstances would you consider running, a mixed release landscape? And what are the biggest inhibitors to doing that? So I've got my containers hat on a little bit there. But I'm just wondering if there were circumstances where you really wanted to go early, but with a subset of your real estate, has that happened? And how can we help you? I know you don't like that, and I understand that, but we're trying to make that situation a benefit, not a downside. So just something to think about. Don't answer immediately.
No, I can answer that.
Sorry to flip it around on you, but it's just an interesting topic.
Yeah, no, I think it really is an interesting topic, and it's a really good point. I wasn't involved in the decision, but I know when we were running 1.3, we took some 2.1 regions and got them up and spinning before we migrated to 3.1. So that happened. I can't remember if it was test or production. And then the other one is, if I'd have had a magic wand, I would have wanted to upgrade to 5.1 when we were 3.1 to avoid using MQ-DPL bridge. And we could have gone from IIP doing a sort of direct, forget it now, but DPL-like call to the mainframe. Because we needed to be Go 5.1 in order to pick up that functionality, and we didn't do that. And I think that caused us an awful lot of development difficulty and getting our ESP platform rolled out. That was definitely an inhibitor to the business. And that's not showing on the performance problems we've had with MQ DPL Bridge, which some of us have been involved in. It was just that I wouldn't have wanted to go down the MQ route originally, and I couldn't upgrade fast enough. to be able to do that. So the ability to run a subset of CICS regions that run some sort of containerization stuff or some Java improvements or whatever it might be, as a customer, giving me more flexibility would be very welcome. It's 11 o'clock, so I'll stop.
Let's pause for 2 minutes to think of those brave souls who gave their lives. Okay, I think we're there. Thank you everyone for observing that. Rob, did you want to keep going or had you finished?
I think I'd pretty much finished. So yeah, having flexibility to run a subset of regions to take advantage of new functionality is easily would be something that the customer might want, but it's hard to predict when it might happen. But certainly in the last 10 years, we've had 2 instances of it where it's been like important, one where we've done it and one where we didn't.
Thank you.
I think I'd like to just for the benefit of some people who may not be familiar with some of the terms, very unusual for people from IBM to talk in acronyms, but we've been talking about the CAF, the CICS Architecture Forum. We've also referred to it as the CICS Futures Summit, CFS. And these are initiatives that we have run out of Hursley for many years now. It's in recent times been driven by the CICS Design Partnership, or CDP, and by a simple click of a button, you can start to participate in a program called the Z Client Feedback Program, whereby this will enable you to be invited to meetings where you will be privy to unannounced information, plans, trends, prototype code. And this is for not just for CICS, but for many of the majority of the Z portfolio. Now with CICS, if you show an interest that CICS is one of the Z products that you're interested in, you just tick the little box, you'll receive an invite, and we run pretty much a weekly 1 hour call that will bring new technology, new ideas, and it's a real opportunity for you to shape the next releases of CICS. It's your opportunity to give feedback on what you think. Does this solve a problem? Is this a problem that you even recognize, or are we just barking up the wrong tree? So if you're not already a part of this CICS design partnership and want to, please contact me. I'll point you towards the correct places to become involved in that. There's a whole community around it. We actually are running our CICS Futures Summit next week. We've got around 100 registrations for it already, so it's run virtually. We're running it from 2 till 5 o'clock in the afternoon UK time. It's obviously, because it's virtual, well, no, not obviously, it is a virtual conference, and we have seen an uptake from different geographies to attend since it has been virtual. But we also have been a long history of running this as a face-to-face event in Hursley over a week, where again we have a big coverage over many geographies that come and attend these sessions. So if it's something you'd like to be involved in, like I say, it's the Z Client Feedback Program, or message me and I'll let you know how to get to it. And I think most people, Rob is part of the Z Client Feedback Program. Rob, I think you'd say that you get value out of it, not just the cheese souffle.
No, I guess as a UK customer, I'm very lucky to be in the same country as you guys in the labs, who do all the wonderful things for us. So, you know, we're slightly better off than maybe some of the folks in the US or South America or wherever they are around the world. I've really enjoyed it, and I'd like to feel that some of the things that we see nowadays are results of conversations that we had 5-10 years ago, because that's kind of how things work, you know, and not just me, more than one customer comes up with a requirement, and to do something really wonderful does take time. You know, the amount of resources we've got to develop functionality is finite, but if you look at you know, the customer experiences, we've had some of my guys from India have been over and they've done all this design thinking as with you guys, and then eventually it comes in some kind of tool that comes out, some of our ideas. So I think it's great not only to find out about what's coming, which is brilliant, but also the opportunity to feedback some of the things that are a pain in the butt for us as customers, and for you guys to take notice of that and make changes that help us. It's a really powerful thing. So yeah, it's been a great experience for me personally.
Thanks, Rob. We try.
Okay, have we got any more questions?
I don't see any.
I'll have another go unless somebody else wants to ask one.
No, go on, because I'm getting near the bottom of my list and they're getting more controversial as I go down. I don't want to ask them with everybody on the call.
I'm not sure how to ask this. So we have an Ansible collection for CICS, which does certain systems management things. We've got a statement of direction around containerization and lots of presentations around what is coming. But if I was wanting to provision CICS regions today, the best offering we have in the market is the ZOS provisioning toolkit. So I guess my question is, if I was starting to look at CICS self-service provisioning today, should I seriously consider the ZOS provisioning toolkit, or should I wait for what might be coming?
Does anyone need a hand on muting?
So let me take that one, because it kind of crosses a number of people on the call. So from my perspective, the important bit is to understand getting your environment into that mindset of DevOps pipelines, automation, and getting your configuration in a place where it's flexible and configurable. So whether you use the provisioning toolkit, which I think is actually a really strong component of the CICS ecosystem, and certainly we're using the provisioning toolkit inside of the CICS team to increase the flexibility of CICS deployment with what we have, that is absolutely, I would say, one of the tools that you could use to get that level of operational automation. I think the answer, unfortunately, is going to be, it depends on where you are in your modernization lifecycle and what other tools and practices you're using across the rest of your infrastructure as to actually which one is going to be best, that's going to get you on the road, you know, ultimately to containers in the long run. Is the provisioning toolkit useful, available and supported today? Yes. The same is true for the Ansible collection and the other automation pieces that we have. Can a customer use that and depend on it? Absolutely. You know, it is going to be, I would say, a continuous journey of the tech previews and more work to come on the containers point of view. I think the provisioning toolkit gets you a good proportion of the way along the journey of modernizing how you go about self-service and getting a lot of the behaviors and cultural change into the team that you're going to need to take advantage of technologies and containers and automation. So I don't think that's necessarily giving you the black and white answer that you're looking for, Stephen, and I'll absolutely let the rest of the team jump in on that. But for me, PT gives you much of the culture change that I think you're going to need to get to containers. And absolutely it is one of the core technologies that we're using internally to get those behaviors in the right place as well.
So, I mean, in terms of things you can say that are definitely in black and white, I wouldn't wait. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point, Fraser. Yeah.
So definitely pick something to start with, because as Steve said, there's a lot of things that would carry over as newer versions of the technology and better container runtimes and better technology comes out in line with the state and the direction. But a lot of the sort of stuff you would need to do, you'll need to do anyway. And if you need CICS provisioning now, definitely don't wait, right? I mean, otherwise, you know, you're just delaying getting a solution to the thing that you need solved. The other thing I'd say is whether you use ZOS-PT, a custom Ansible thing, your own thing, or whatever comes out from IBM in the future, whatever you're doing to do provisioning, you're going to need automation as well. So I don't really recognize the sort of black and white choice here. I mean, I think what you're asking, Steve, is should I write it all myself in Ansible or should I use other bits? But I suspect you'll have, even if we get to if you imagine the tech previews we're currently putting out becoming GA at some point, and we get, you know, container-based technology on the back of that, you know, most container platforms still have an element of automation associated with them, whether that's, you know, post stand-up tweaking, whether it's to do with just the pipeline that builds the containers. You know, this is a big sort of blurry overlap between those technologies anyway. So I don't think it's an either or particularly. And then Steve's right. I think you just have to assess the supported offerings to see what's the best fit.
And I mean, I can't amplify Fraser's comment there enough around it's not an or conversation. It absolutely is. You know, you need automation, you need Ansible, you need some of the scripting technologies to make PT and the other container environments work well. If you're going to get to that level of self-service and rigor and control of automation that I think customers actually want to end up getting to. So yeah, it's definitely not an or.
Yeah, and I'd just add that, that there's value on the road, isn't there? There's not just stay where you are, wait for the perfect panacea, and then shift and get all the value. It's a case of, you know, you can do small steps on that journey and get increasing value as you go. As you automate more and more, you will learn more and more, and things take time. And moving from, you know, ad hoc configuration and, you know, lots of people doing lots of things and exchanging emails and tickets into configuration as code and automation and build processes. Each of those little steps, you know, you take someone out of the loop and it increases the time in which, or, you know, decreases the time in which you can provision systems for developers, for example. Each of those little steps has value en route. So yeah, definitely don't wait. There's lots of technology, and sometimes it does take a discussion, a discovery and a journey. But that's no different for CICS as anything else. It's just we've had a lot of custom stuff for CICS for many years, and unearthing that archaeology to to figure out what we've done in the past and is now just embedded in JCL scripts, you know, will take time.
As I said at the beginning of the Q and A, we're 20 years into software agile processes and practices now. And so as much as you apply that to creating loosely coupled services on the software architectural side, building loosely coupled DevOps pipelines, that means that you can, in an agile way, continuously improve your DevOps practices and processes. That's just as important. So I would always ask the question, what's the one thing that prevents that team, that application, that process from being better than it was yesterday? And how can we change that as quickly as we can and get some value now? So it's, yeah, as these DevOps processes improve and continuously change, how do you create those loosely coupled pieces that do give you flexibility in the future to adopt, you know, this ever-changing landscape that we're on?
Okay, thank you all. My observation, I think we've got a bad habit in IBM of announcing something, making it available, and it may be several years before a customer is ready to adopt it, by which time we've announced something else and our focus is elsewhere. So I think it is good to remember that customers might be several years behind what we're making available, and to continue investment in that technology for beyond the initial few years.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of things, even CICS Explorer or something like that. But region deployment's always been a very interesting one for me, because we've got, speaking personally as a customer, we've got quite a mature process for cloning and replicating CICS plexes. I think creating things region by region as these very generic containers is great, but I don't know if affinity is the right word. We just seem to have too much going on with our own stuff to worry about deployment assistant or whatever the latest one is now, provisioning toolkit. And we'll kind of get there eventually, but I think it'll just take a long time. And as we said at the start, you know, the new stuff kind of fits in with this, and the old stuff not so much. I've got one more technical question that I want to answer. I've got one I don't want answered, which I'm not going to ask. But we've been doing some work with ZOS Connect recently. We've done some work in the past with MQDPL Bridge, and certainly the performance of interfaces is a big thing now. I think, you know, we've done lots of work with the performance of CICS regions and whatever CICS does with DB2 or VSAM or whatever. But it seems to me that more of the MIPS nowadays is to do with interface or routing type logic. And we had a performance issue the other day, and my capacity guy was going on at me. And some of you might have got copied in on some of this, but it was just around on waiting for first dispatch on the QRTCB. Now, the QRTCB was a sort of single threading issue in CICS in the medium stages of my career. Would that be right? The early stages of my career. And we've got all these TCBs to allow us to do multiple threads, but we still kind of have a performance dependency on the QRTCB in most instances with CICS. I wondered if there's anybody in the panel that could explain why, and possibly why we've maybe can't move away from that any more than we have. I know it's a difficult question, but it's just something that I don't really understand, so I thought I'd ask.
Well, the short answer is because it's hard.
Yeah.
We did all the easy stuff first, and then we did all the moderate stuff, and then we did some of the hard stuff. And John's face gets scared, more and more scared each time we ask for more and more thread safe. And then we did some of the stuff we thought we'd never do, I think, didn't we, John? But then after that, there's some stuff that we look at and go, oh, I don't see how we're going to do that.
It's cool. I just want to kind of set my capacity team's expectations, really, more than anything else. But,
I mean, we do continue to look for more opportunities to make more stuff thread safe. We have pushed, some of the bits of, the transaction attached path for Java and other things into places we never thought we'd go. Again, to get more parallelism and less QR dependency. But there's often little things that trip us up, like one little dependent service that you didn't even think about that turns out actually to definitely need to run on QR, or else everything goes wrong at very high parallelism. So, we never say never, but we are, it's getting increasingly more challenging to chip away at any more of that.
Okay, thanks, Fraser.
One thing from my perspective of doing the testing here for performance, it's very useful to find out under what circumstances that QR does become a problem. Because until we get a ticket in to say a QR is contended, then there's a significant lead time between, all right, okay, we need to fix that. So if we can start getting ahead of things now and running tests, that would be useful. So, as Fraser says, most of the stuff that's left is very hard. There's no low-hanging fruit left on a 50-year-old product. But if we can at least know which ones are affecting people now, then we could start looking at them.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of I'm going to drift into iPic now, which is a bit of a performance bugbear for me personally. But it was traffic coming in from a ZOS Connect started task via an iPic connection that has to start on the QR. And it sort of blindsided me a bit. I went, oh, does it have to start on the QR? And then we asked some questions, and yes, actually it does. After that, yeah, we can do things with it. So yeah, I wasn't expecting it with iPic, and it's my first experience with iPic connections. We've talked about it a lot of the CAF, and there's been lots of feedback, and I know some of the other customers in America did quite a bit of benchmarking with iPic, and the only thing that I've ever picked up with iPic is that remote VSAM can be thread safe using iPic connections to a file owning region, which I've never tried. But obviously iPic connections aren't as good as MRO, particularly when MRO is cross memory. And so it's always, for me, just because I've got a sort of legacy of looking at performance, because we had smaller boxes years ago, I've always sort of steered clear of playing with it too much. But we've had to use it this time, and it's been interesting because it doesn't acquire or kind of work the same as MRO connections. But I was just a bit pissed off that we had this QR dependency, that the first time everything came through, and the fact was that my CAP team pointed it out to me and were kind of giving me feedback that I had to do something about it, and quickly became that we couldn't. And yeah, so I just try to move on to something else and not change the world.
Okay, thanks.
Have we got any more questions? Anyone brave enough for just one more thing?
There's nothing in the chat at the moment, Rob. So
okay, then I don't know. In as chairman, in summary, Nick, thanks for running this this meeting. I think we've had some. We had a great virtual session last year with lots of attendance, and I think that made GSE a lot more special for me, considering the pandemic and all the things that we've all been going through. And we've had really good attendance this time. This has been our most popular session. We've had a lot of highlights, as Nick has already mentioned. For me personally, VTP and the resources defining with Chris are two things that I want to move forward with, or try and get my organisation to move forward with. So that's great. And I think that the performance corner with Dan Zachary and then Ezra on Tuesday afternoon was excellent for an awful lot of people that are kind of newer to the platform, and a great reminder that performance really is kind of like once you learn the basics, and once you've got a methodology, you can make big differences to what's going on in CICS. So Steve, thank you very much for providing all your speakers and your team, and everyone from Hersley giving their time for us, the customers. We really do appreciate it. It's been a great session. and I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Really appreciate your continued leadership on this track. It's important for us to have that momentum in the UK to support our customers, and really proud that the team have come along and helped make a great GSE UK this year in a virtual forum again. So appreciate it, Rob, and thanks everybody.
Okay, Nick, do you want to close the call?
Okay, right. Thanks all for joining. This is the last session in this year's UK GSE for CICS, I think.
Cheers, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.